Well, welcome to our third election special episode of Round the Table. In this 4 week series, as we approach the election, we're examining 4 different pillars for a flourishing society and considering the general election news and updates in light of those pillars. As Christians, we really want to engage well and positively with the election, but that requires thinking about the real fundamental issues that are going on in our nation. What's truly important, looking beyond what the media says, beyond what the political parties want to tell us, and thinking not only about what society values, but what God values. Sometimes issues like our spiritual foundations, the value of life, the value of family, the value of freedom. Sometimes these things are treated as secondary issues, even by Christians. We think that economy and immigration and international policy are much more significant. Of course, these things all matter, but paradoxically, by focusing on what really matters to God, the fact that mankind is made in his image, valuable, male and female, made to worship him, we'll find solutions to those other issues by focusing on these ones. So today, as you join us live, please put in your comments if you're watching. We'd really love to show them on screen. We'd love to engage with you in that way. It also really helps if you do that and if you click the like button because it helps other people find us. So do that if you're watching live. That would be really appreciated. Without further ado, let's start looking at our third pillar for a flourishing society: family.
Church, awake, arise. Let's be unashamed of God's pattern for marriage at the heart of society. Let's do that in this election season. Genesis 1 tells us that we are made in God's image, beautifully and wonderfully made, equal in dignity, with marriage as the basic building block for families and for society. How simple and how precious is this truth? And yet it is so forgotten at the heart of our political system, at the heart of our society. We need to recover this precious truth. For decades, we have abandoned God's beautiful design. Sex outside of a marriage, divorce, sexual confusion and gender distress, all because we have rejected God's pattern. Alternative family structures, well, they are praised, they are promoted. 2 men or 2 women with adoption, surrogacy and unethical experiments pursued with the deliberate aim of depriving a child of his or her mother or father. Real marriage and family are routinely mocked in our culture. Motherhood devalued, fathers sidelined. Children are often treated as inconvenient rather than the blessings that they truly are. How much does this attitude fuel the demand for abortion? Education is supposed to support families to pass their values on to their children, but is being used instead to instill support for LGBTQ plus ideologies, causes like pride. Recovering the importance of family is critical to reviving the health of the nation. Strong families lead to healthier relationships and healthier children. They benefit from grandparents, uncles, aunts who can pass on wisdom and lend a helping hand to pressured parents. It's hard to imagine a long-term solution for social care, indeed that doesn't include more children and more families caring for elderly parents. The larger political parties may just be beginning to wake up to this and indeed other situations such as the gender madness that we've seen in recent years. Even the policies that are claimed to be pro-family often have the opposite effect. Let's not settle for political talking points that fail to recognise the scale of change needed when we've abandoned marriage and family at the heart of the political and societal structure. Let's use this election season to stand for the beauty of God's pattern and purpose for family. Awake, arise, O church, and speak to this truth.
Well, that was our Chief Executive, Andrea Williams, there speaking about family, and she joins us now. Hi, Andrea.
Hello.
And also, we're joined today by Roger Kishka, Standing Counsel to our Christian Legal Centre. Hi, Roger.
Hi, good to be on.
Fantastic. A reminder to everyone watching, please do get your comments in. We've already had a few in there from the legendary Keith Waters, who has been very good at speaking up for family. And he got into trouble for it once, and we helped him out at the Christian Legal Centre. Thank you, Keith, for joining us. Thank you for that. And from Jacqueline, saying it takes a village community to raise a child.
Surely does. It surely does.
It's not just about the nuclear family, as it's called, but we'll hopefully get onto that as we go. Now, Andrea, you qualified as a barrister in 1988, and in your time working with the law, then you've seen some massive changes to law and policy in that area. Do you want to just tell us about that and what most strikes you about how things have changed?
Well, I think if we were to go back to 1988, go back to, in fact, the 1980s when I was studying, and I think sometimes it's hard for us to think in this way, but in the 1980s, it would have been impossible to imagine that we would legislate in this country for marriage to be between two men and two women, that we would wholly redefine family, or that we would then extend the definition of family in law to mean two men, two women, a man and a woman, married, civilly partnered, with children, either naturally or by way of fertility treatments, and that all of this will be protected and promoted as equivalent under human rights legislation, equivalent under the Equality Act, that these things would then be taught in our schools, and those that might have conscience objections to the promotion of such ideology, in fact, would be punished. Well, this has all come to pass in our nation. And what we see this election season is our major political parties grappling with this new reality of what is called and promoted and protected in law as family, but in fact, which raises major issues at the heart of society. The truth is that society is sane, society is safe, society flourishes when marriage, as God defined it, as between one man and one woman, is protected and promoted at the heart of public life. And then all the things that flow from that, which is the extended family and so on, that and the protection of children, when that is promoted, then that's how a society is well and civilized and full of hope. No society survives abandoning that at the heart of the legal system. And that's why we're in the chaos that we're in. And really, it's time for our political parties to tackle this head on. And I don't think that any one of them has tackled this head on. There will come a time, because without it, society implodes.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that, you know, we can choose between Conservatism and Labour, as we have been in this country for a very long time now. They have been forming the governments, but the direction's been the same, maybe at different speeds. But we've for many years, longer than I've lived, we've seen the same movement of direction towards this chaos. And so like you say, the parties aren't really tackling this.
Just on that, Paul, and perhaps before Roger jumps in, but the really distressing thing that perhaps people do not realise is that it is under a Conservative government that same-sex marriage came in. David Cameron proudly got onto the stage at the Conservative Party conference in 2011 and said, I'm in favour of gay marriage, not despite being a Conservative, but because I am a Conservative. And it is under the Conservatives that all these anti-family policies have come to pass and been celebrated. And not just that, indeed it was with him, with David Cameron, again, something he said that he was going to proudly export same-sex marriage legislation across the world. And as I begin to travel across the world to other nations, I've begun to see the impact of this. And these nations unwittingly adopting our equality policies. not knowing what it is that will come as a result of that.
Absolutely.
And then,
in the manifesto itself, in the Conservative manifesto, it says we were the ones who introduced same-sex marriage, and they're putting it there proudly. So it's still part of their message to us that they're confused about what men and women really are and what they're really for. Roger, this confusion between men and women and has been hard coded into our law for some time with things like the Gender Recognition Act. And same-sex marriage, as we just said. What kind of problems does that cause in the bigger picture?
I mean, it causes tremendous problems. We need to look no further than our schools. The amount of self-harming and suicidality and other mental diseases, mental illnesses that our children are suffering. I think Andrea was right that this does begin with marriage. That was an institution that was given to us by God. Christ in the Gospels, says that even in the Old Testament, you were allowed to divorce by giving a certificate. And, Jesus reiterates the importance of marriage, that we're not doing it that way anymore. Marriage means more than that. Christ himself is part of a trinity, part of a family. We were born into community. Adam was alone and got Eve, and they had a family. This is the purpose from the beginning, from the first beginnings of Genesis, is family. And family has always been about faithfulness to one partner, living with that partner for, until death do us part. And it's been family centered. And one of the things we've lost because of culture and Hollywood and these types of things is this idea that we're radically autonomous, that we as people in marriages should be able to do what we want, follow our own heart, and let kids be a secondary issue. And that's why marriage has fallen apart. That's why marriages are falling apart. The state has stepped in and taken the parental role, and they're providing the morality through education, through the local authorities. They're checking even homeschoolers to see what they're up to in ways we've not seen historically ever, really. And when you ruin marriage in that sense, when you stop promoting it, it's quite easy then to redefine it, because we let it happen under our watch. And as Christians, what we need to do is we need to be proud of our families, to promote the family culture, to reclaim it, to keep our politicians aware that this is something that they need to do. They need to be held accountable.
It's the beauty of children, the beauty of children, the idea that they are a gift, the idea that they are to be protected. And of course, this is where the whole scale truth of God's purpose and pattern is so important. If we abandon marriage as the place for sexual expression and begin to have a situation whereby there's free license for, and we teach our children that they're free to be sexually active early and so on and so forth, and then we create a situation whereby there are unplanned pregnancies and then there's abortion, so then we're not valuing, in fact, our children, and that then creates a culture in which an anti-life culture, so laws then do not protect life from the moment of conception. If that's where we begin, then when children are actually given to us as a gift within marriage or within a relationship, perhaps then it's not always understood just how miraculous and amazing that it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree. I think in what you just said, in a sense, we've gone back 200 years by now thinking that people are property. We have a right to a baby. It's not a gift anymore. And that's why we get all these crazy surrogacy laws and artificial procreation and things like that, because we demand that we have kids when we want them and how we want them, and we don't even have to carry them to term. We can get someone else to do that, and it's really just gotten spectacularly messy.
Yeah. We've got some great comments here from Michael Petek. Says same-sex marriage is irrelevant now. The Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act 2020 has effectively abolished all marriage. That's the act that allowed completely no fault, no reason divorce, where one person could basically say, yeah, I've had enough now, and just get out of the covenant of marriage. So thank you, Michael, for that point. and Colin Newton here as well. While the Conservatives were definitely at fault, the real problem is people at work behind the scenes sneaking concepts like marriage, equality, and transphobia into the popular vocabulary.
Well, I want to speak about that. I could say that. That's exactly. I mean, we saw that. We saw that spectacularly during COVID, when literally through the corridors of Whitehall we saw laws being changed. So we, at that time, got pills by post abortion sneaked in, and that was really done by those that were working as civil servants in the health department. Similarly, laws with regard to travel to Switzerland in order to commit suicide. Also, the laws weakening the safeguards around divorce. All of that occurred during COVID and was driven by civil servants. So, Colin, that's absolutely a good thing to point out. And that's why it's not just that we can't land everything at the politicians' doors. Politicians reflect the people. They reflect the culture. And Whitehall is inculcated with a culture which we need to seek to change. But that's also a reflection of the demands of the people. And something that we often say at Christian Concern is that those that, a parliament is a reflection of the church within the nation. And if we do not speak, if we do not act, if we are not proclaiming the name of Christ and his ways, then there's a sense in which we have failed to be the prophet and the priest to the king, to those that govern. And so, again, spectacularly in many ways, just as it was a Conservative government under which we got same-sex marriage and the wholesale tearing up of family, so we had an Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who at the very same time in 2011, when he first came into his position, was unable to say clearly that marriage is between a man and a woman, and who was conceding. You can go back to the Hansard record of Parliament and see how he was conceding civil partnerships and the importance of them. And now, 10 years later, in the Church of England Synod, we have the blessing of same-sex marriages and their recognition. And it ought not to have been difficult for an archbishop, indeed for bishops, indeed for any minister, to say that marriage is between a man and a woman. But when the established church can't say that, and by the way, I don't want to bash Justin Welby. There's a sense in which, where are we all? Where is the church at large? Where are the other mainstream denominations? Where even are those that that perhaps are large movements? Are they speaking really clearly on this? Where are the festival movements? Where are we all on this? It's easy to point to Justin Welby, and he has a very important position. But what I always challenge the church. I say, what would you do if you were Justin Welby? Would you stand under this pressure? Would you stand? I tell you who did. Keith Waters stood. The person who first came. And Keith Waters, as someone who was working in a school and stood up against pride in his city, and a cathedral that in Ely that was flying a pride flag, who stood up against it, who stood up against a pride movement and a pride parade that would include children, and all the sexual promiscuity that shows, and the sexual immorality that shows. He lost his job. In fact, he got visited by undertakers. He got threatened. He got vilified on Twitter. But he's a hero. In the moment when he had to stand, he stood. But how many Keith Waters are there out there?
Yeah, and one of the things is, I think we so easily as Christians just take in the culture around us. So you often see kind of comedians and people kind of talking about their children as if they're just inconveniences and burdens, and and kind of there's a strong cultural value that kids are really annoying, aren't they? But we sort of have to maybe put up with them in some respect, and it's really easy for us to kind of go along with that. But it's not even just that. Like, sometimes we see children as just neutral. Like, some people choose to have children, and some people people don't, and so they're sort of equal choices, and they're just the same. And some people could have children, and other people might take up a hobby or go traveling around the world, or these sorts of things. And while there are reasons why people remain without children, and there are good things about traveling around the world, and people are called to be missionaries, and there are all kinds of things like that as well. But we must see children, God's image bearers, as more than just neutral. We must see them as actually good, because they are there and able to bring glory to God. We were supposed to fill the earth with godly offspring, and that is the purpose of marriage. And children are good, not just neutral. So, Andrea, I just want to think about that a little bit more. We see children as burdens, and at the same time, people who are older and have kind of stopped working, who are towards the end of their lives, they're also seen as burdens sometimes. Why do you think this is, and how does it affect things beyond just the traditional family issues?
Well, I think that if we get to a place in the world at large where the most dangerous place for a child to be is in the mother's womb, if we have a situation whereby in this country we have aborted 10.2 million of our citizens, that is the whole of London wiped out. That is 1/6 of our population. That's our major cities, all of our major cities wiped out. That's very, very serious indeed. And so if we don't have an idea that we are really protecting life from the moment of conception, then there's a sense in which we devalue all life, because as if we can choose the lives that are worthy to be born or not. And there's a sense then in which the generation that chose to kill its children will be killed by its children. And so what we then see is this weakening of general laws in order to protect life, and this public conversation that says at some point life might not be worth living, and also this radical autonomy and radical independence, this radical human rights ideology that is proposed, then means that you have a right to choose when to die if you so want to. So there's also this that's being promoted, but sadly, that would be a law for the in a sense for the strong, because it's not those that saying I want to die that need to be protected. It's the weaker, it's the more vulnerable. And if we've lost family and the protection of a family unit around that also renders people even more vulnerable. And the right to die then becomes a duty to die. And I'm at that stage of life, now, where my children are grown, and I've got the great blessing of I still have elderly parents and parents-in-law with me, and I love to have them with me. But what I see is my aunts and my uncles have died. I'm now in communion with lots of my friends, the friends of my parents and parents-in-law are dying. And I realize the vulnerability and the loneliness of people that are aging and their fragility. My parents also ran a residential home for the elderly when I was in my late teens. And even way back then, I saw the vulnerability of those that were alone. And I saw my mother's care of feeding Alice with a teaspoon and loving her, and how Alice came to life with that love and care. And there's a sense in which when we don't value life in that way, and all that the elderly can bring, and all that we are because we care, then we dehumanize culture. We dehumanize culture. This is it. I mean, this kind of general devaluing of life. We will abort those that may be disabled when they're born. What kind of life would that be? What is it to sit in a chair all day long and only be able to shuffle around age 90 or age 85? What kind of life is that? What value is that life? Well, that life is precious.
Absolutely. And that just shows how those issues, we were talking about life in particular last week, and family this one, which shows how closely they go hand in hand. And obviously with the foundations, the Christian foundations, those foundational beliefs about being made in God's image, valuable, that play into all of those others. And I think next week we'll be talking about freedom, and you'll see very quickly how it links to that as well. Roger, one of the ways that family is worked out in our society and the value of family is in our education policy, and how children are brought up in that environment to have the same values in a sense as their parents do. How is it that our culture, particularly in the UK, hurts the family in that area of education?
It's funny. I was just thinking about back when I was a university student, and I don't know if it was my dad, it was someone close to me was saying, because I was studying philosophy, that there are no more philosophers in the world. Why are you studying something that doesn't exist anymore? And it's absolutely not true, because what we're living right now is the outworking of all these philosophies that came from the late 19th century up through the sexual revolution. That is our reality. We're living a philosophical reality of craziness. And that has so heavily seeped into our education policy. So, we made mandatory sex relationships and sex education in 2020. And it's required to be taught at primary schools, whether it's maintained or independent. And even at that young level of primary schools, encouraged that LGBT education be taught, that gender identity be taught at secondary school. And if you go back to the statute of what Parliament actually passed, none of that's in that. This was the Department for Education who added all these extras about what should be taught, how it should be taught. And I remember at the time being in Westminster and being in that building, in the DFE building, and seeing that there was no Union Jack there. It was a two-story pride flag that was in the windows. It was the only symbol there. The email taglines at the time, if you were to write to someone at the DFE, was "We are LGBTQ plus champions," very proudly so. And that's the influence that shaped this law. And so it's no wonder that we have record numbers of kids who are identifying as bisexual or identifying as gay, lesbian, who are gender confused. And a credit goes to this current government, because they're really trying to reel back, especially some of this insanity with gender identity. And hopefully with sex education and retooling relationships education to put more safeguards in there. So all the credit in the world to them. I hope that whoever comes in as the next government will maintain that, because I'm a young father myself, and when I look at my daughter, I understand God better, that innocence, that beauty, and we're taking that away from our kids. It's horrible.
It is the thing. This is it. This is really it. Ideas have consequences. So philosophy, you're absolutely right. It's had consequences right into the heart of our education system. And that is massive in terms of government. That's massive in terms of party politics. There's a sense in which we, the people of Britain, think it's the state's job to educate our children, when in fact, our children are a gift from God to us, to the family first, to the parents first. But it's as if we cede them to the state to be educated, as if the state is somehow neutral, when we have all these policies that have grown incrementally, so that now our children are not taught that God created them male and female, aged 4. They're taught that they can be anything that they want to be, male or female. They can have 10,000 honeysuckle dresses. A king can marry a king. Heather can have 2 mummies. This is all on the curriculum. And teachers are punished unless they promote it. Teachers are punished if they don't accept and affirm an 8-year-old identifying in the opposite sex. And removed from teachers' licenses, reported to counter-extremism agencies. It is very serious. Ideas have consequences. Philosophical and political ideas have consequences. The political ideology is coming from the philosophies that have been worked out in the academies, but we're now living them on the ground. And it's our innocent little children that suffer. And parents everywhere, Christian parents, are just don't seem to be okay with this. But we can't be. And we have to speak to the parties. We have to speak to our church leaders. We have to speak to people to say enough is enough. This requires a change. And the change is, in some ways, it's simple. Because these things were all unthinkable in 1988 when I qualified. It was unthinkable to say that an 8-year-old child an 8-year-old boy could come to school in a dress and a teacher could be fired for not affirming the child. Unthinkable. It was unthinkable that marriage could be anything but between a man and a woman. It was unthinkable that two men would hire a surrogate womb to have a baby, and that would be family and taught in our schools as an equivalent and protected, and you could be punished for not promoting that. Or that two women could have donor sperm and the same applying. These things were not in our imagination. And you see, this all comes around. I want. This is what I'm right to have. This is how I define family. This is how I define my right. And we've protected all of those things, and now we promote them, and we punish those that even question them. Because let me say, when I look at a Keith Waters who's on this live stream, or a Christy Higgs, or a David Mackworth, or a Joshua Sutcliffe, or a Maureen Martin, or Owen and Eunice Johns, when I look at our clients, these people have love, they have compassion in their heart. They don't have judgment. They have God's truth at the heart of their lives. They're motivated by his love, and they're motivated for the good of people, for the good of children. And that's why when we speak these policies, we don't speak them in a vacuum. It's not morality without a basis. It's morality deep, steeped in the word of God. And if we need a party to be proudly proclaim that, we need a party to proudly proclaim Christ. Proudly proclaim his ways. Imagine that. I tell you, whether people know it or not, if we had such a party, this nation would be happier. Our children would be happier. Families would be protected.
Yeah, so this election season, it's not just about how you use your vote, although that's important. There are some smaller parties which some people can vote for who do have some pro-life, pro-family, pro-God policies. Christian People's Alliance comes to mind. There are some others as well. We'll hopefully have a website article up explaining some of those and helping you find out about those shortly. But as I say, it's not about just how you vote. It's about how you live your life as a whole. It's about the other 5 years between election cycles. And it's about how we promote the value of our Christian foundations, how much we value Jesus and everything that comes from him, life, family, freedom, and so on. These things are just critical to recovering a society that is shaped by Jesus and that people are able to flourish in. And so as well as voting, we need to pray. And that's the main thing that we're calling people to do a Christian Concern this year as we think about the election. Next Wednesday, we have the last of our election prayer live streams that take place at 12:30 each Wednesday. Again, we're going to have a focus on freedom for that. And you can find out about that. You can join us then on. So if you're not yet subscribed on YouTube or liking us on Facebook, then make sure you are so that you get those notifications. So join us for those. But even better than that is on 3rd of July, the night before the election, 5:30, we have an election prayer rally outside Westminster. It's going to be a really wonderful time, I think, of united Christian prayer. There are going to be lots of different types of Christians there, but all really faithful, believing Christians who want to see our nation transformed by the love of God. It's going to be a really excellent time. Find out about it on our website. You can go to christianconcern.com/election prayer. That's the easiest way of finding out about it. But make sure you're signed up also to our emails, where we'll be telling you and reminding you about that. So that's Wednesday, the 3rd of July, outside Parliament. You can just come along if you want to, but there are more information. There's more information available on our website, christianconcern.com/election prayer. Thank you so much, Andrea and Roger, for joining me today and talking about these things. Obviously, only 35 minutes, not enough time to completely solve all of these issues, but it's been really good to outline them and help people understand them a bit better. So thanks for joining me. It's been really valuable, I think. And please make sure you join us if you're watching now. If you're make sure you join us next week, where we're going to have the final election round the table live stream focusing on freedom. So we'll see you then.